Hello and welcome to the Recruit Rockstars podcast, where we focus on the people part of your private equity and venture capital funded company. I'm your host, Jeff Hyman. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. My guest today is a very interesting woman who leads talent operations for an up-and-coming fund, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But briefly, I want to tell you about Kelsey Lawrie's background, because it's not only impressive, but it's extremely well suited to what we're going to talk about today. Kelsey was in recruiting and talent acquisition at one of Chicago's fastest growing companies, Trunk Club, which was acquired by Nordstrom not that long ago. Prior to that, she was at CBS Sports. So she just has a wonderful background of working with growth stage companies, both public and private. Currently, she is VP of Talent Operations at 87. Now, 87 is a whole story by itself, and I'm going to ask her to tell us about it, but kind of was born out of a multi-billion dollar private equity fund, Sterling Partners in Chicago. So she has a fascinating insight on how to build your team, whether it's consumer-focused, whether it's technology-focused. She's done it, and she's here with us today, and I'm so excited. Kelsey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be on the show.
Thanks for making the time. So why don't we start with just kind of the high level, 30,000 feet. What is 87? Kind of an unusual name for a fund, but what is 87? What is the scope of it? And what is the relationship to its predecessor private equity firm, Sterling Partners?
Yes. So you gave a great introduction of Sterling, founded in the 80s, a diversified investment office here in Chicago. And 87 has spun out within the last, more formally in 2019, informally in 2018, and we represent the consumer wing of Sterling Partners. So incubating and investing in businesses focused on building direct relationships with their customers.
Got it. Can you give it a couple of examples of companies that have been announced, just so people understand?
Absolutely. So Black Rifle Coffee Company was our first business that was part of our portfolio. They are a veteran-owned, veteran-founded coffee company, direct-to-consumer. Fancy Sprinkles was brought in as well to the mix, which is another really fun story, direct-to-consumer, technically edible arts business as opposed to just sprinkles.
I guarantee we're going to circle back to that one, because just the name alone, but let's come back to it.
Exactly. Grounds and Hounds is another coffee business that ultimately wraps up into the Black Rifle LLC, and direct-to-consumer, mission-oriented as well towards pet adoption. And then our first incubation is Jetson, which is a direct-to-consumer probiotics business with the goal of just overall providing more Americans with overall health and well-being, and probiotics is sort of our first mission.
Got it. So going forward, are you more focused on incubating or investing, or are you really doing both?
Great question. I would say both. It really just depends what opportunities present themselves, in addition to the type of resources that our team is able to offer. Of course, an incubator requires more of our resources and internal efforts, but I think if we're excited about an idea, we'll figure out a way to make it work.
Got it. Fantastic. So you've got this great context coming from Trunk Club. You've seen this movie a million times in terms of the talent piece of early stage companies, right? Give us a little bit about what you just kind of your point of view that you bring to this whole thing. What, if you were teaching a class about talent at these growth stage companies, what's the punchline? What is kind of your starting point?
So in the case where I am now, and we have a really unique opportunity to be able to work with multiple companies at different stages. And so most of the time we get a feel for the talent that exists now, and really get to know, I think, the founder or the CEO of that business. And in many cases, actually, there isn't a CEO. The founder is operating as both, and they are quite open with their need to fill in the gaps, or they're willing to admit what they don't know.
A lot of these are first time.
Yes. All of them, I guess, have been. So I think for us, it's a matter of really getting to know the founder and where maybe those gaps exist on the team. And the punchline to me is typically hire for the gaps, and really find the resources that will support the gaps that you need to drive and scale the business to the extent that you want to.
Which is not always easy, because it means being pretty intellectually honest and vulnerable about your own weaknesses, which we all have. I got plenty of gaps. Are all founders and CEOs able to do that, or do you think some of them struggle? Have you seen some of them struggle
I
with that?
absolutely. I think we've taken a really, and just over the course of my career, it's been a really interesting evolution to see the emotional awareness and almost professional maturity that founders may or may not have. But I would say we've been lucky enough, or I've been lucky enough in my career to work with quite self-aware leaders. I think it lies less in their ability to admit where the gaps are and more in honestly their ownership and what level of ownership am I giving up if I admit that this is a gap of mine. I still have a vision. I still feel really strongly about where this business it should go, and I want to make sure that I can have that say at the end of the day. So it's really making sure that they feel almost comforted in a sense that we're not here to disrupt their vision or take away their dreams. It's really a matter of how are we getting you the right support to make sure that you focus where your strengths are, and someone else can come in and help take anything else off your plate.
What's a common uh, example of those gaps? The thing that comes to mind for me, Kelsey, is if the founder, CEO, leader is a product person, maybe they're not so good at sales and marketing. Or if they're a big picture thinker, visionary type, they're not so good at execution, implementation, and kind of project management. Those are common. But are there other examples that come to mind for you of, if you're good at this, you probably are not so good at that?
We come across, I would say, a lot of outrageously creative people. I mean, understandably entrepreneurial mindsets, visionaries. And so most of the times where they admittedly need the help is genuinely running the business. And so
Yes.
what are sort of the operational functions I need to make sure that this meets my vision? So to your point, it really is just quite simply, they own creative or they own sales and marketing. And it typically is the ops finance portion of the business that we tend to have to build out
Yep.
or support.
That's a very unique case to be able to be great at both of those things.
Yes.
Right? Like 1% of people can be great at both of them.
Exactly.
Got it. Let's talk about finding these people. You spend a lot of your time, I assume, recruiting or helping recruit. It's obviously the listeners know that it hasn't been this hard in 50 years to find great people.
Right.
What are you finding is actually working? Where are you still finding great candidates?
So I think it's a combination of, and maybe it's less of the avenue at which you're pursuing candidates. I'll be honest in saying it's not necessarily, my approach hasn't changed. It's more about making sure that we're representing businesses that resonate with candidates and that they can get excited about. So all of our businesses represent some form of a mission-driven approach, and I think that's what candidates are really looking for.
Is that a requirement for your investment thesis?
It requirement may be too strong of a word, but I do think that we just naturally connect with businesses that have some overall benefit to the community, to the people that they're going after, to maybe a charitable cause. I would say that's certainly part of our mission statement is we really, I think that's important to us. But when it comes to matching the candidates to what we're doing, more times than not, the candidates are willing to continue conversations because they are passionate about what we're building. And so I think it's about building an environment that candidates can be excited about. Sort of the, if you build it, they will come. That's always not the case. But then I think your strategy in finding those people is making sure that you are authentically sharing what that really means to you and what you aspire for this business to be in order for a candidate to get really excited about it. So it's almost mastering your pitch of what that dream could look like.
Have you found that as an early stage company or a growth stage company where you can't afford to pay top dollar, you can't break the bank, you can't pay what Google and Apple and Facebook can, that if you have that mission and you're able to make that connect and resonate with candidates, that you're able to actually get them to come for less money?
Yes. And this is something that I think that my former CEO, Brian Spaley, was absolutely, I mean, if you want anyone to sell you the dream and not get paid for it, he could have convinced me to take a job without a salary, believe it or not. And I think there are just certain leaders that are really incredible at, and he does so in a way, and I think good leaders do so in a way where you acknowledge that this is going to be a buildup and there will be resources at the end of this because we believe that this will be successful. So it's really about showing future candidates how much you believe in what you're doing. And that passion really seeps through. And I think people can connect with that,
Yep.
and constantly explaining the why, constantly explaining what it means to build something and the work that it takes, and being overly transparent about that really
Yep.
connects with candidates, I think.
You need to be transparent about the challenges, the roadblocks we're going to
Totally.
face. It's not going to be a straight and up and to the right.
Absolutely.
Uh, so you got to be able to figure out, how does your mission connect with people,
Mm-hmm.
which is easy. If you're a veterans coffee company, it's pretty obvious to understand how that could resonate with a lot of people. Maybe a
Mm-hmm.
bit tougher with sprinkles or something else where it's less heartfelt. How do you dig into the company? Let's say the company makes air filters. I don't know.
Yes.
How do you find that hook that when you talk to candidates, they're like, wow, I'm coming for more than just the money. I'm coming for the mission.
Yeah, it's certainly about the overall package. And I think what that can mean to a candidate is, if it's not necessarily a crazy exciting, and you never know, some candidates get jacked up about air filters, but I think it's about, how are you going to give them an opportunity, and it's a two-way street, but how are you going to give them an opportunity to develop in their career, to learn new skills, and potentially offer them benefits that may work very well within their personal lifestyle. And I think it's sort of finding the balance of what will speak best to the types of people that you really want to hire.
Got it. And then you got to be able to tell the story, which
Exactly.
means selling, right? This is really no different than selling, which
It really, yes. It's funny how much recruiting and sales have in common, in that you've got to have your pitch down, and it's really important that your message resonates strongly enough, because it's a candidate market right now, to your point, and there are a lot of opportunities out there, and anybody can jump at a better offer. And so a lot of times, if compensation is out of your control, you need to make sure that you as a person, your team, whatever it may be, is connecting enough with the candidates that you really want. Because more times than not, I have seen that if you can really get that down, it doesn't necessarily come down to the money for all candidates. It comes down to the opportunity and the future ahead.
kind of, let's switch from recruiting to culture, DNA. Um, you see these companies, these relatively early stage growth companies. Tell me a bit about what you've learned. Tell our listeners kind of how to think about the DNA of their company to know if they're getting it off to the right track. Because what I've seen is, if you don't get it on the right track, it's really hard to fix it later. Your culture, your DNA, etc. So what are the early building blocks that you got to put in place to make sure you get that heading in the right direction?
And it's as simple as building them and writing them down. And I think a lot of leaders can easily overlook what it means to put a mission statement together, and what that vision is, and what you want your values to be. Even if you're a team of one, you can just write down what your own personal values are. And I think so many of the businesses that we support, a lot of their values just derive from the leadership that's presented itself. And it is what is represented at the top. And so taking the time to be thoughtful about communicating what that is, and being very consistent with that message to anyone on the team, to how you're evaluating performance on your team, how you're trying to sell the job to candidates. I think there's I think an art in not only creating them, but being consistent about it. Otherwise it really goes to waste, and people I think there's sort of a lack of sort of truth and accountability to what you've built and what you're saying that you represent.
The hard part is actually living it,
Totally.
right? Because you're about to hire a director of marketing or a sales rep or an engineer. Their competencies are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
They could do the job inside and out, but they're not quite a perfect match on the DNA. Should you ever compromise? And if so, how do you kind of think about that? How do you weight competencies and fit with the job versus DNA and fit with the company?
So I'm a big believer that when it comes to startups and small businesses, that it is far more important that the person meets your, call it qualitative competencies, that they meet your value set, as opposed to the very specific skill set of the job. Because there's some things that I think can be easily trained and taught, whereas others, when it comes down to integrity, being a person that you want to sit next to every day, cannot. So at the very simple level, not only do you want to really focus on the type of person that candidate may be, but similarly acknowledging that your business is going to evolve so quickly. And as long as this person has generalist capabilities as opposed to only specialist, that is what will be able to, checking your ego at the door, taking on whatever, not only thinking they can provide strategic value that they can execute at every level is really important to make sure that you're in terms of what you're hiring for.
I want to make sure I understand this. You're actually saying that you would prioritize or overweight fit with the company and DNA more than 50%.
I would, of course, to the extent that the job requires, if you're looking for a web developer or a very specific skill set, that is going to be totally different. I would say at the initial stages of your business for your initial team members, absolutely. I would overweight that, quite frankly, acknowledging that you have vetted that person enough to know that the skill is there, but that they are going to be with you on this ride day in and day out, and typically on evenings and weekends to make sure that this business is scaling in the direction you want it to.
You mentioned vetting. What can you share with listeners about the most predictive way to vet a candidate? Because you and I both know that interviewing is close to a joke, right? You're not going to see the person in action, et cetera. What have you found to be the killer way to vet a candidate?
Yeah, to your point, it's interesting because I still, probably contradictory, I still find that giving the team and involving as many people in the interview process is incredibly important. And again, even if you're a team of one, having others meet with this person, people that you trust. I think if it's a specific role where they're going to be executing on creative or analytics, that there are tests that you can include in that process. And it could be as simple as giving someone an example to help perform. You'd be surprised at how willing candidates are to show their work.
Yep.
And so if there's an opportunity to do so, I think that's really important. But interviewing in and outside of the office, and it's not just in different settings, in different types of interviews, whether it's presentation style, I think there is an opportunity to make sure that you're getting to know this person along the way, and that you're thoughtfully thinking about the types of questions that you're asking them. And even the prep work beforehand, I think, can often be overlooked. It's about really acknowledging the competencies that you need for this person and how that will apply to what you're asking them to deliver at the end of the day.
What kind of reference checks have you found work best? I know in private equity, venture capital, you have just an incredible network, right? And ways to check references. How many, who, how? Give us the 60-second lesson on how to do this.
Yeah, so I have yet to find a reference that a candidate provides me with that is negative. So very little do they even, I think if you ask for a weakness, they provide a strength as a weakness.
Yeah.
So more times than not, to your point, we thankfully have just being I think just having more experience and being in the community of Chicago, that tends to be a wonderfully supportive community when it comes to referrals and really just general touch points. I tend to find that finding a common connection and reaching out to that person and just saying, how was your experience? So not to
let's
say
call them backdoor references.
Exactly. So a backdoor reference, I find actually quite useful.
The question I'm asked all the time is, how do you do that without getting the person found out if they're currently working?
So, so meaning a current employee or
someone who's currently employed. How do you backdoor reference them without their boss finding out and you getting them fired and then you feel awful?
I do everything I can to find someone from maybe the job prior, or if it's someone that I trust and is a close contact of mine, that I know it wouldn't be a detriment or wouldn't impact their personal situation. I think you definitely have to be super careful of anyone you're reaching out to, of where that person currently works.
Do you even check the references on the list that they give you, or would you say, thanks for the list, I'm going to check the people I want to check?
I do both.
Got it. You do both. So, and how many ballpark, for not for a CEO, but for, a VP of marketing, VP of sales, whatever, how many references might you check?
I think 2 to 3, I would say, per candidate. We ask them to provide us with anywhere from 3 to 5 references.
Yep.
And then, Backdoor, I would say anywhere from 1 to 2. It depends on the level of seniority, to your point. And if we're able to get sort of as much juice as we can from the referrals provided, in the nice cases where referrals are quite honest, references are quite honest, you feel like you get a great picture and you understand where opportunities may exist. But if not, then it's always great to just double check.
Got it. Worst hire ever. So you don't have to name names. You don't even have to name the company. But what I'm most interested in is, what did you miss? In hindsight, what was it that could have given you an indication that this was not going to work out?
So I know exactly what this answer is. So good. I hired someone and I didn't trust my gut. I tried to hire someone that was very different from me for my own team. And I ignored my gut on what's important to be successful in the role. And I think I was trying to think outside the box and acknowledge that not everyone like me will be successful in this kind of role. But instead, I ignored very important competencies of what it means to be successful in this type of job. And so what I would say is really trust especially if it's your own skill set and you're hiring for your own team, trust what you believe are the competencies to be successful. And don't ignore your own success of why you are where you are today and what's made you good at your job. I mean, hiring a recruiter that is an introvert, I probably really should have second guessed myself on that.
Yeah. And is that the piece that you said, I'll look the other way and I'm going to hire them anyway?
I think it was someone who came across as a bit more analytical and introverted, and ultimately wanted to just be behind a desk, wasn't as driven. And it was something that I overlooked to try to almost diversify my team. And it ended up, unfortunately, biting me in the foot.
Well, you learn the hard way and you'll never do it again, I'm sure. We all have those stories. Every listener does. I do.
Totally.
And I can't thank you enough for your honesty and sharing that with us. Kelsey, Lawrie, how can people learn more about 87 or get in touch?
Yeah. So we are 87 we're on our website. We also have a list of portfolio companies. So www.87 spelled out, and I'm even just 87 spelled out .us.
Yeah.
And just a kind of a quick shameless plug, and I think something where it's been helpful to be able to figure out how we build our businesses is the fact that we're able to actually offer resources internally with the businesses that we support, and we're excited to connect with CEOs along the way and anyone looking even just for more understanding of how they build their teams out and how potentially a kind of a platform like ours can be supportive.
Fantastic. Congratulations. It's a phenomenal platform. You got some amazing portfolio companies already. I don't even want to know about the ones you're incubating. You can't tell us about, but we'll have you back on the show later this year and you can hopefully share those with us as well.
Amazing.
Great. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you.